Okay, we are live. Hey, everybody. Got
Hello.
Peter Hyatt here. Bella.
We have the man here today. So for those of you who don't know who Peter Hyatt is, we love Peter Hyatt. He's one of our favorites, if not our favorite that has been on. He came on and talked a little about Darlie Routier with us. Peter Hyatt, for those of you who do not know him, is the #1 guy in statement analysis, where he teaches people in the FBI. You teach corporate America too, right, Peter?
Yeah.
He teaches corporate America. He teaches police in different countries. This is the man who knows about statement analysis and teaches everybody statement analysis. So if you want it from Peter's mouth, he's here today, and he's going to be discussing with us Don's newest release that he did on his Don and Candace page that he wrote from prison. How are you, Peter?
I'm well, thank you.
We missed you.
I appreciate it.
Oh, sure, but I'm so impressed with this man, so I hope he'll talk about Summer's case. Yes, if you guys have any questions, he's open to questions. He wants questions, so you could just start putting them in the chat now, and I'll star them. So they have a new little option now. We could star the comments so we don't miss them.
And Peter calls it pushback, right, Peter? When we ask questions, when he says something and we ask questions, and he loves it, right, Peter?
Yeah, in fact, we go even further than that. When I work with a team, which is the best setting, is we deliberately disagree with each other. We push back on any theme that someone may bring out. It's absolutely necessary due to the complexity of human nature that we have disagreement, and that we have that pushes to a final coming together of ideas that work. So if we're looking at a statement, and each point of sensitivity or each point that may indicate deception, we do our best to argue away. We're going to excuse it. We'll minimize it, anything we can to get rid of it. By the time we're done, if we concluded there's deception in the statement, it means that the person has overwhelmed us. So anyone could be defensive, anyone could be this or that. And we try to really even push back against ourselves for the sake of what we call a science. That used to be a definition of a science, was to question everything. So we really want to question everything, and disagreement is not just simply welcome, it's necessary.
I agree. It is necessary. You don't want an echo chamber, right? Where everyone's just agreeing and...
No, it becomes useless. It becomes where ideas go to die, and truth is scaffolded off.
I love that. Okay, so we probably should start now. We're like 3 minutes in. We can wait a little bit. We could say a little bit of hellos and give some people a chance for their notifications to catch up. And then maybe start in like a minute, 60 seconds, something like that. What do you think, Tiff? You're muted.
I know, I'm gonna mute when I'm not talking. Yeah, I already have 2 questions starred, but when should we do maybe go through the statement a little bit and then ask the questions, or how do you want to do it?
Do you mind taking the questions first?
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. So the first one we have, Ashley says, what do you personally think happened that day after all the interviews? Wait, what interviews do you mean, Ashley? I wonder, do you guys, Bella, do you know what that means?
Let us know, Ashley. Do you mean the law enforcement interviews, or the first interview put out by the news, or... We'll come back to that, Ashley.
Yeah, okay. So then the second one we have from Gailey. What's your take on Candace's statement? We have to focus on the boys because they are still alive. When she said that.
It's what we call an unnecessary statement. Instead of looking at me, let's look someplace else. Let's deflect away from having a shining light on me, which can be understandable when you're searching for a missing person. One of the things that John Walsh had advised parents many, many years ago was, answer all the police questions, insist on a polygraph, clear yourself to get all the attention on the missing child. And that's become rather a standard that people will follow when their child goes missing. So they want to be cleared as soon as they can be, because, and this is their motive, we need to find the child. Whereas others want to push it off for themselves. They're not always fully cooperative, usually somewhat a level of cooperation, but as soon as certain things come to light, we see human nature and self-preservation take over.
Just say, which parent, in your opinion, seems to have guilt, and which one has guilty knowledge?
Great question. So this is something that I thought we should discuss regarding the case overall. I mentioned before about the interviews by Chris McDonough of both Don and Candace. And in interviewing, we have on one hand like a legally sound interview, open-ended questions, which give the analyst a great deal of information. So we try our best not to contaminate anything. In law enforcement, they go through a progression on an interview, and you'll see this sometimes. And I often think it's something that really can't be trained to a certain level, where they're instinctively just good at it. And then you give them training, they get even better. But they'll start legally sound, and they'll move into or combine what we call a therapeutic interview. A therapeutic interview is where someone is sympathetic and making friends, using ingratiation to get information. And then there can be a time where the interview then moves into an interrogation, which means now accusations of guilt and threats of consequence. And so Chris has a very rich background, and I think he probably has many confessions or admissions. The difference for us is a confession is to acknowledge what one has done wrong, what one has done, and that it was wrong. And an admission is, I did it, which we don't need them to admit that it's wrong for a court case, for a legal settling. So Chris's interview was more therapeutic than it was legally sound. And I think he was getting close to a place where he was going to be given enough admission that it may have helped solve the case.
Wow.
So yeah, he came very close, and Don shut him down, which I think that's something worthy to talk about, Don's reaction.
Do you think, because in all this, things have gotten a little bit muddied because there's been it actually hasn't been that much time in between, but there's been so much internet time, which like one day is like a year, it seems like. Do you think it was because what Don says, which is Chris McDonough stepped over the line and was accusing him and recording him without his knowledge? What do you think set Don off to shut it down?
Okay, that's a great question, and it's loaded, so we really should examine it. And this will sound probably overly simplistic or obvious, but there really is much more depth to it. Don's language is what we call the language of addiction. And understanding that is critical to understanding Don, and then trying to get discernment on the other question that I think is quite loaded as well, is guilt and guilty knowledge. So we'll look at it in two parts, but I have some notes on the language of addiction. We use this not only in investigations, but even when someone's applying for a job. We don't want to hire someone, and we being corporate America, we don't want to hire someone that's going to be using drugs, affecting their judgment, bringing in disreputable people in contact with the company, and it's just a mess. It's a mess. And the language of addiction is known by certain characteristics. It doesn't always mean someone is an addict. When we see these things, it could be certain parts of the personality. but the language is very different than someone who is in recovery. A person that's in the throes of addiction might say, I take full responsibility for that. And the audience is thinking, what does that actually mean? What does it mean when you say you take full responsibility? Whereas someone who is in recovery will talk about an example of time when they took responsibility for their actions. So it's a stark difference. One talks about it, one examples it in the language, and both of this is language. So some of the things that people, I think, did a good job recognizing in Don, in commentary after, especially with the interview room, where Don really went after certain things there. His language indicates an active, acute, and very lengthy addiction. So it's active, it's acute, and it's lengthy. It's not something new. And others, a lot smarter than me, can argue whether or not this was a personality disorder that self-medicated. Maybe the case there. I think it fits there. Or if some elements became accentuated with the use or abuse of substances, or it went through some kind, and some people claim that it just alters the personality so much. And it's interesting debating those different points on it. But here's some of the characteristics within Don that we see in the language. And please feel free to interrupt me at any time to ask questions about any of them, whether from you all or the audience. The first thing you'll see is someone like this who is manipulative. They wish to use language to persuade, which is natural for all of us. They take it to a level of manipulation where their self needs protection. So I would like to persuade you to say nice things about me. If I have a really deep need, I may use more persuasive language, which may cause people naturally to kind of pull back. It's like, hey, what's going on with this guy? With the addiction, it's coming from a deficit, a severe deficit, moral deficit, intellectual deficit, a deficit of failure in life, where they can become so much so manipulative that they no longer recognize it. So a good example is filling out a job application where someone doesn't answer a question, but they say, oh, I'd like to answer that in the interview process. What they're telling you is I'm more comfortable in person than not. Now, there are complex things in life that you want to explain in person, but answer the question. Too often we find that the person that needs to come in, needs to have the face-to-face interview to explain something, has a lot of confidence in his ability to put one over on you. And they will become emotional, they'll sit closer, they may even try to touch the person, all different signs that say, let me ingratiate myself to make you feel like you owe it to me to hire me. Their words give them away. I know you're taking a chance with me. So you've just told me now that hiring you is a chance. Hiring anyone is a chance. But by you signifying the language, something else is at play. So one of the first things we'll notice in the language is manipulation. And this is just the start. There are a lot of people that are manipulative. Some come and go, some situational, some personality driven. Many are not addicts. So we're looking at all these traits together, though. The next one in the language of addiction is what we call the victim status. They're always a victim.
Always.
It was my parents, it was my spouse, it was my children, it was the weather, it was God, it was the universe, everyone's against me. I dropped a glass of water, and you see how everything goes wrong for me? And they become embedded in that in ways that if they can't get out of it, it becomes part of them. We say that like an addict will steal. Everyone will say, "Oh, an addict will steal because they need money because they're going through withdrawal," and that's true. And it's a strong impetus for getting money. They will also steal because they think they're owed. So in a way, they don't think they're stealing. They think they're balancing the account or getting reparations for some perceived wrong in life. And they will at times hurt others because of that. And I don't mean just hurt in the sense of taking money. So Don reveals himself as a victim status. It is who he is. It defines him. And in that, he will go as far as blaming victims. And how far did this person, Don, how far did he hurt people? He sexually abused them in childhood. And that's one of the things that Chris brought out in the interview process that set him off. He minimized, which is a natural reaction. It's whatever we do wrong, we have an amazing way of turning a little bit cold towards it. Don went real far as someone that is practiced at it, but someone else in the throes of addiction, they will want to control others. So from now on, I'm only speaking to one person, and it's going to be a person I can control, who's going to challenge me, like maybe beforehand and not live, so we can settle things out because they're on my side. And sometimes the best thing you can do in a situation is have someone who is really attacking you and be able to answer them. I advise people, if they get fired from a job and there was a dispute, use the person that fired you that really hates you, use them as a reference. I'll talk to them and I'll be able to tell if they go too far, if it was personal, and whether it justifies the person's own statement, own defense of themselves. It's really good to know sometimes what our enemies think of us. It can be very helpful. So sometimes in a case, someone will say that I'm a genius and that the greatest thing going. And then another case comes up where they disagree. It's like, oh, that guy's a hack. He's horrible. And you see the wild go back and forth. Well, what Don does is he seeks to control interview and situation, and he gets panicky when it begins to lose control, and he does something else that addicts do. He attacks. And so an addict is manipulative. An addict will cling to an identity of being a victim status over anything and everything. And anything that goes wrong, do that. They seek to control others, control the narrative. It becomes, and it's heartbreaking. Someone has an addict in their family, maybe they're one of their adult kids, for example, and they find that the adult kid has to control everything. Even people's responses, even people's face expressions, everything. They have to control it. And here's another one. Another characteristic is that the active addict will often become a philosopher. And you'll see this on social media, on Facebook, other places, where they will give a philosophy that you must live by. And then the next day, here's another philosophy you must live by. And this is what you must do. Over and over and over. And you finally say, hey, you know what? The 50 steps to good living, I can't even keep up with them anymore. They're overwhelming. They don't have that self-awareness of how they're coming across. So, and it can turn out into a religious aspect of it. And it can be quite judgmental. But think about some of the things that Don has said regarding religion, and we'll look at that statement, and you'll see how this language of addiction flows to even religious language. The religiosity, which you'll see being very judgmental towards others, is a marvelous way of pushing the attention off himself, the negative attention at least. They do like attention seeking, and one of the things that both of these people have done, Don and Candace, is they have sought the limelight. And then when the limelight got a little bright for them, they become angry and bite back. So the philosophy, you see it a lot of times posted on Facebook and every day, and it often includes cruelty or meanness or lack of charity towards others. Your best to cut out the toxic person in your life. Hey, toxicity is rough to deal with in personalities, but what if you love the person? Right away, it's that called a black and white demarcation. They put either they're wearing a black hat or a white hat. They're either the savior, wonderful, or they're horrible. And Chris went from one to the other.
Yeah.
They thought they were going to play him, and they didn't. He had too many years in law enforcement. And so in terms of that therapeutic job, he did a good job with it. The therapeutic interview, excuse me. They will also find a way to keep it within their language away from anything that exposes them. They become very adept at that. And I think it's something that comes from childhood, where they're good at casting blame at someone else, or even just causing a bit of chaos. So chaos is over there. So everyone looks over there to the chaos, away from what the real issue was. So it's pretty severe. It's acute, and it's long going with him.
And you said it's active. What part of that makes it, because the things you're saying, I think we're all in chat, and me and Tiff are sitting here going, we know so many people like that, and ex-addicts or current addicts. Is there a way to tell the active part from?
With Don, it's ongoing. And even when it went towards where Chris was guiding him or Candace, both of them, to a place of strong human empathy with someone that had lost a child, they would still turn at certain areas, which I wish it could have been further explored, certain areas of the interview that just got too close. And then Don had no problem crossing over, using deception and accusing Chris. Like, it was very smooth to him. When I talk about an active, there are those that begin to work sobriety. And for those who are very strong, who are experienced in sobriety, you hear them talk about refusing secrets. Secrets kill us, secrets are bad. What they don't want, because they fear going back, they don't want the comfort of being let off the hook. Because that's where they used to use substances, drugs or alcohol, to alleviate that pain. They would rather face it, so they don't allow. This people that very strong in recovery, they were always on the lookout for something that would just lead them to self-pity and self-medication, and to alleviate some of that pain they have within them. So they're most attentive to anything that could cause that. So we look at someone that, and it's like a going this way. Someone is just in the throes of addiction. It is active, it's ongoing, and even if they claim sobriety, it's not true. And they move into sobriety, and then they become really experienced in sobriety, which includes some failures and some stumbling, some setbacks, but they get back up and they dust themselves off and they keep going. So companies hire those who are really active in their recovery, and they do well, and I admire them. Don was revealing during the interviews that he was an active using addict during that whole period of time, and to this point, who knows what he's able to get his hands on in prison or jail. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I know the steps. I'm a recovering addict, but I didn't work the steps. Whatever works for people, but that, it's repeated a lot about not having secrets and not keeping secrets. And you know, it's like kind of a mantra, so you accept it. I never actually broke that down. I understood, like, yes, secrets are bad, but I never actually put that together until you just said that right now, that it's because it's the wanting to get called out so you don't get comfortable and kind of keeping people at bay, like, I got it under control, everybody, you know, type of thing. That's learn something where you don't expect to learn something. It's amazing.
Yeah, if we all feel sorry for ourselves at different points. Sometime during the day today, we will all feel sorry for ourselves. Sometimes with those in very strong recovery, we'll say, you know what, I'm feeling really sorry for myself. In other words, don't let me be isolated. And they're able to protect themselves that way. I love the honesty. I think it's terrific.
Yeah, that just blew my mind about the whole secrets thing. Like, yes, that is being called out, having friends around you that are willing to say you're acting a little bit off, and, you know, being able to own that, like, oh, I am, and just you respect the person so much that you take it in, and okay, maybe I am, you know. So I don't know, it's great. Okay, off of me.
The addict that becomes the philosopher. I want to balance that. There are people that will turn to music, to poetry, to literature, and they actually let out some of their talents, which is, I think, a wonderful and healing thing to do in life. The one that's in the active, ongoing addiction, especially the acute ones that are just really in deep, they want you, whoever you are, you, me, the rest of the world, to change. And whatever it is, that tomorrow will be a different change, and a different change after that. It's their way of not looking at themselves.
True.
For some people, some religious people believe that what hell is the removal of our defense mechanisms. We have to really see the horror of what we have done to others and who we are inside of us. Because we have, as human beings, we have an amazing ability to deflect things. That's how we survive. With those in active addiction, it's pronounced, and for a lot, it's personality. It was before the substances entered.
Very true.
Yeah, for others, it's, you know what, I was a different person on drugs or alcohol, and they have a greater awareness, a self-awareness of their faults, and generally speaking, that leads people to be more forgiving of others. So it's like someone abused in childhood. They often become protectors of others. They offer to others what they themselves didn't have. But a few of them will become calloused towards or indifferent towards the suffering of others. I think Don is quite the latter.
I agree with that. Yes. Should we look at the statement really quick?
Yes, I was just going to say that. You read my mind. It's a perfect. And I have 13 questions starred, so we could ask after the statement. So people are asking some good questions. Okay, yeah, let me bring up the statement real quick.
It's a great chat. Everyone's so smart.
Yes, I know. You guys are coming up with really good questions, guys. Okay.
The reason I wanted to touch on the language of addiction before we look at the statement is because of what's in the statement.
I caught that halfway through what you were saying. I was like, so smart, Peter. It's good.
Okay.
So for those of you who don't know about this, which probably everybody here does, but you know, if you're just joining us or you don't know, this was a statement that was released on the official Don and Candace YouTube page by their social media representative. And it was written from Don while he was put in jail. And at the end, you'll see it says February 6th of this year. But on the actual YouTube page, for some reason, it says February 17th. So whether he started it on the 6th and continued it on the 17th, we don't know. But it's very recent. So Peter... I'm
going to mute real quick. Sorry, hold on one second. So I'm going to... probably be muted. That's probably smarter to be muted most of the time, right? Because when I have that up, I won't be able to come in and mute myself, and I'm afraid Zeke will be. He's been barking on.
She's muting herself. But yes, so Peter, being the statement analysis expert that he is, will be able to break this down for us. And this is statement analysis is an amazing tool. If you guys don't know about it, if this is the first time, you will be amazed by this. So, okay, it's not up yet though. Okay, there it is. All right.
Do you want to read the statement first?
Do you want me to read it?
Please.
I can. Okay. Just wanted to thank all YouTube creators. Laugh. There's only one creator, God. But I wanted to thank you as you've all been very helpful and an answer to my prayer. I was so naive. Jesus said, you must hate the world and love God with all your heart, might, mind, and strength. Beautiful children, please help me understand this. Then summer was gone. Then my boys. I turned to so-called YouTube creators for help. What a joke. After 7 months, yes, I hate everyone's ways but a very few. Thanks for helping me understand just how evil this world really is. Yes, now I hate the worldly ways of everyone, even my own. But now I have an eternal love for God and understand exactly what our God has been through himself since day one. I only have very few friends in this evil world. Thank God for them. You know, they are the ones that Satan attacks constantly. Now I understand what Jesus meant. Narrow is the way, and very difficult, and few there be that find it. The king of this world, Satan, he may have my daughter, but not for long. His time is short. You know him. He has one of your family members on drugs or messed up somehow. Deceive, divide, destroy. You know his work. Jesus says, turn to me and I will give you rest. And thank God for his goodness and all the peacemakers on the earth. If it weren't for them, we would all be completely lost. Thank you, God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, and angels, and all of God's children on the earth. Thank you for saving me from myself and evil thoughts, from that downward spiral of hate, envy, pride, drunkenness, and all manner of evil. Thank you, and please keep fighting the good fight, my friends. Don Wells, February 6, 2022.
Okay, so we can talk about this in terms of breaking it down. A written statement. This is a written statement, was it?
Yes.
Okay, from jail. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the sexual abuse of a child. That child will suffer to some degree for the rest of his or her life, and every person that loves that child will be impacted by it. It is one of the most horrific things that can happen to another human being in terms of the betrayal, the expectation, the fear, the trauma, the hormonal consequence of such. It is so powerful that we find it in language. We actually find evidence 30, 40, 50 years later. And I've talked about this a lot because I've had a lot of experience in working with others, and the language is where, and I'll just use an example. A little girl is sexually molested by someone. And even pre-speech can show up later on. They will sound like liars later on in life. Sometimes we even rely on, as we're analyzing the testimony of behavior. This is the way I liken it. mommy and daddy are fighting physically, or daddy is assaulting mommy while the baby is in the nursery or in the crib. The child has the same reaction that anyone has hormonally, the fight or flight hormone in particular. The child cannot, however, cope with that hormone because the child can't run away, the child can't fight, the child can't process it. And so this is where we get PTSD from, this type of long-term impact. And the child may appear to do well, and by the time that she's 10 years old, she's got great grades in school, she's well loved in her family. And then adolescence hit, and it seems like the wheels come off. Everything goes wrong. And let's say that she survives those years where she was wild and really self-harming, taking risks in life and maybe not even knowing why. But she gets past it. She survives high school, college years, and now as a young adult, maybe she's even a successful mother or a professional, and she's doing really well. And then suddenly, at a certain age, I find it to be around 50 for a lot of women, depending on their health, of course, their hormones begin to decline. And as if in life, the bill wasn't paid early on, now comes due. And they no longer have hormonal strength. Their own kids have gotten older now, and maybe they're out of the house. And she can go to pieces at that point. And this is how long people suffer from those things. And what I'd like you to consider is who Don is in relation to these things. So in the statement, you'll notice the first thing that he says, and I have to pull it up here, is not the pronoun I. The pronoun I tells us that a person is psychologically present. They may not be telling the truth, but I can get a really good read on what they're talking about. Now, if this is a job application, I'm saying, I am a hard worker, I'm really good with customers, I like people, I get along well with coworkers. That person is psychologically present in their words. That pronoun I is very strong use there. So we always notice when a statement doesn't begin with the word I, but the word just, which is a comparative word. Now, if that same person is not a good worker, is not someone that gets along with others, that does not have good customer service things, they may be wrong in their opinion of those things, but they're still present. And if by chance they know that they're not those things, they are very rare, 10% or less of society that way, and they're dangerous. And they're dangerous. So Don shows an awareness by stepping back. And so what we might want to consider is, after the whole passage of time, that would there be any denial, a natural good denial of a parent that will not accept that his daughter is dead? We know, and it's hard for me at this point to dismiss or to divorce myself from all else I know about Don and the other interviews, but he owned that he believed she was dead from the beginning. From the beginning. So there was not that natural, I'm not saying that's guilty knowledge, but he knows more than he's letting on. And that's what I think Chris was getting close to. So he begins without the pronoun I. What he's telling you, what he's telling me as I look at it, is I am stepping back from what I'm about to tell you. And notice some of the things that he does. He talks about thanking them, and that's twice, right from the very beginning. Okay? Because this is indeed about him. Thanking them. And he goes on to say, there's only one creator, God. So you know you're going to get a message here. You're going to get some form of a sermon.
You're going to get preached to?
You're getting preached to. Now, if you talk to me and you said, Peter Hyatt, you are up for this job position. We just need to ask you, there was a report that you were using drugs on Tuesday night. And I can do one of two things. So I can, you know, if I didn't, I could say, no, I didn't use any drugs. I don't use any drugs, and I didn't. And what happens is you find the pronoun I and a past tense commitment to my denial. I didn't use drugs Tuesday. In fact, I don't take any drugs. I'm willing to take a drug test. Because, you know, because you're on the ropes here. You're a little bit defensive because you're being accused. But the first thing out is a denial. With the pronoun I, with the past tense commitments, and with the allegation specifically addressed. If I'm lying, I am really bad news. I'm rare, but I'm really bad news. So with that, what would you say if I said, you said, Peter, one of your coworkers said you were using drugs last Tuesday. Let me tell you about drug use. Let me tell you how bad drugs are. Let me tell you what should happen to people that take drugs. And I go on and on and on. After a while, you're like, uh-oh, this is trouble. You're getting a sermon, and we call that an unnecessary sermon. So, you know, in the back of my car, I have a bumper sticker. There's no excuse for elder abuse, right? It's unnecessary to say that. Is there anyone out there saying, you know, I was on my way home and I wanted to let off a little steam by beating up my Grammy, but I saw a bumper sticker and I decided not to? Or is there anyone advocating we need to beat elderly more and more? So it becomes this virtue signaling, this need to be seen in a moral light where it's not necessary. We're not here, and there's no one in the chat that's going to say, hey, I really think beating old people is a worthwhile endeavor. It's unnecessary to moralize that way. What that person is doing is telling you, I am coming from a deficit. He's going to identify the deficit for us. Watch this. So just wanted to, because I was so naive. How's Summer doing? How are the boys doing? Jesus said you must hate the world and love God with all your heart, mind, and strength. So I said, God, I don't understand this. I'm so perfectly content. I'm so perfectly content with my beautiful wife and beautiful children. I don't think any of us have been perfectly content for 10 minutes in this troubled world. I have been so excited at the birth of a grandchild. I mean, just thrilled. It's like the greatest thing. And I don't know if my heart could feel any more excitement. As soon as the baby has a dirty diaper, here you go, change this for me. The hyperbolic language is telling you something. That sounds an awful lot like Scott Peterson. So what was your marriage like? I think he called it bliss or something.
I think he did say bliss in that monotone.
Yes. Yeah. I have more emotion and I'm faking it. Life isn't that way. He is not being real. And this is a form of a deception, persuasion and ingratiation. It came after two uses of thank you or thank. And now an abuser wants to convince us that he's perfectly content with Candace and his children. What that suggests, and this is obvious because this is a rearview mirror analysis, but what it would do if you were seeing this for the first time, you'd want to explore for the possibility of domestic violence and child abuse. Because we know his story, it's domestic violence and child abuse is part of it. But this is why, to get far away from it, it's not, I lost my temper with my kids, or I spoke ill to my wife, or I'm now paying the price for that. He was perfectly content, just like Scott Peterson. So
he's
beneath that,
saying, I believed in you, God, so much, and I'm a victim because I believe. It's also a victim statement, isn't it? That little paragraph.
over and over it is. In fact, it's going to be through this, you're going to see that victim status. Very good observation. Then summer was gone, then my boys. So that's passive, which may be somewhat appropriate because he wasn't there when summer went missing. But what about his boys? Why was the boys taken? Or why were the boys taken? I'm looking at it as a singular event in his language. Why did it happen?
Seems like it happened because of summer, because it does seem like a singular event in that sentence.
Yeah, he pushes them all together like a singular event. But I just want you to know it's not his fault. See, I can argue with myself about the summer, him not being there, and the passivity being okay. Passivity is like where I say, the gun went off. Alec Baldwin, the gun went off. You know?
Rust, yes.
It removes responsibility. So someone could make an argument that he wasn't there when summer went missing, so therefore the passivity is justified. That's fine, good. What about the boys? What caused the boys to be removed from the home? He was abusive. He was abusive. So right away, beginning without the word I, being a little bit ingratiating to thanking people, giving us the nonsense of being perfectly content. You know, what he's doing is giving a portrayal of himself as, oh, look at me, God, I just didn't know what I was doing. Okay? This is a guy that abused a little girl many, many decades ago. And you think about the damage to that, he is the victim. Child Protective Services did it to me. Now, it's not a defense of Child Protective Services because there are good people and there are bad people, and there are good people that make mistakes and there are bad people that miss certain things. And it's very complex. And someone may be genuinely a victim of having their children removed erroneously. Okay? He knows how to dog whistle. He's quite good at it, in fact. I turned to so-called YouTube creators for help. What a joke. After 7 months, yes, I hate everyone's ways but a few. So he's dog whistling to people of faith. He's using some biblical language that he doesn't understand. Hate and love are contrasted. They're not emotions, at least not in this context. It's to say, I hate means I turn my back upon doing rotten things to people. I love meaning I'm going to cling to and seek the best for others, other things that are good. So he's using that now all about himself here. So he turned to YouTube creators for help. They betrayed him. It wasn't his fault. They betrayed him. And I think that's probably a reference to some of the interviews that he's given where he was called out, rightfully so. And he made false accusations against Chris. He claimed that Chris said certain things he didn't say. Thanks for helping me understand just how evil this world is. Yes, now I hate the worldly ways of everyone, even my own. He's the afterthought, even up in the ante there. But now I have eternal love for God and understanding exactly what our God has been through himself since day one. I'm not sure what that means, what God has been through. I only have a few friends in this evil world. He is the victim. Thank God for them. You know, they are the ones that Satan attacks constantly. So when someone, he thinks that someone defends him, and this is also manipulative, they're going to be attacked by incarnate evil. This is more victim and trying to gain people around him. And he gives his lectures about Satan, about incarnate evil. He has one of your family members on drugs or messed up somehow. He has now introduced what I think is central to this case, and that is drugs. Drugs. And that's where I'll be able to speculate a little more on what I think may have happened there. I thank God for his goodness and all the peacemakers on earth. If it weren't for them, and these are people that will agree with him or not challenge him, we'd all be completely lost. The language is what we call immature language. And I don't wish to question anyone's faith in the sense of the worst could find redemption. What I'm saying is he's not honest, and he uses this to attack others. He's using the language of faith to justify himself and to be on the attack for others. And that's what he has done. And that's what I think he has done his entire life. An example of that, and I don't have the exact quote, but this was early on in the case, is he was going off on people that go to church on a different day, on Sunday instead of Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
Your daughter's missing. You've been in prison. You've done some really bad things to people in life.
That's right.
And you want to argue about what day they should go to church. He uses it to remove himself from guilt. So that one of the viewers asked the question of guilty knowledge versus guilt. It is very difficult to discern in someone like Don because he is overwhelmed with guilt and he works overtime to keep himself safe from that guilt. So when it becomes so much in life that it becomes his normal walk, it's very difficult to discern without direct questions. And that's where I think that Chris Madonna got too close to the truth.
Peter, what do you think about him going from the I pronoun to the we pronoun? Is it just we don't look at that, where he's saying I, and then all of a sudden he says, if it weren't for them, we would all be completely lost. Like we as in him and Candace, or him, we as in the general we population. What is he saying?
Very good pickup. That is something that he's doing to crowdsource guilt. It's no different than the little kid that comes home and say, what, Mom? Everyone was doing it. Right away, that child does not want to be alone with guilt. Even though it's minor guilt, it's a great learning lesson for the child to be called out by the teacher, or by the parent, or by someone, because it can avoid this type of nightmare living later on, where someone is unrestrained and someone is without learning discipline and then self-discipline. You become a Don Wells. Society puts you behind a cage because you're dangerous. Well, the crowdsourcing of guilt is something that we all do, we all want to do, and you'll hear this in the language of recovered addicts, where they will almost pull back from the crowd. This is about me, and I can't do that. I can't dish it off on someone else. They're really quite remarkable. These are the recovery ones with that. On my my Facebook posts, sometimes I put things that I think are funny, and no one else does except Heather. But I put a statement up where a woman was she's a YouTube influencer or Instagram influencer, something like that, where she had hundreds of thousands of followers, and she was asking for money. And she said, people seem to think that I'm a millionaire. And I put it up there, the entire quote, asking readers if they thought this was an embedded admission or not, and how they can figure that out. But one of the interesting things that she did was she went from I to we immediately, and she was talking about her and her husband. So a journalist peeked a little further into their finances, and yeah, she is a millionaire. She's married, and their wealth together is worth over $1 million. So it's fun to look at when you're learning, to see how someone goes from I to we for a reason, and then to trace it out in the context. So if you take a look at the Facebook page, it's up there where you can look at her quote and see the I from I to we and how it works.
You need to do that. Yes, I agree. Everyone check out Peter Hyatt's Facebook page for that. It's a good, if you don't know about pronouns in the way that we write, Peter has taught us so much about looking at pronouns and what they give away. And we might get into a little bit of it here, but it'll be something that you'll start picking up on. It's fascinating.
The pronouns are instinctive. The political winds of telling people what pronouns they should be using, it's political. It's not instinctive to our language. When a little kiddo sees me, he assumes I'm male, and he'll go right to those pronouns. He won't stop and say, should I call him he, she, or ask him what I should call him? It's just instinctive. And so politicizing that type of speech oftentimes leads to a desire to control. Pronouns are wonderfully reliable in statement analysis, getting to the truth.
Yes, you've taught me so much about just that. Just pronouns alone have helped me so much with looking at a statement. It's like maybe the groundwork. I don't know if I'm right or wrong with that, but to me, it felt like it was kind of the groundwork of statement analysis.
It is. If there's only one thing someone has time to learn about detecting deception, is follow the pronouns. Even someone that's being really careful with their pronouns, eventually they start speaking for themselves. If they use the pronoun we, who are they talking about? Because there's more than one person. If they use the pronoun I, then it's them. And if they eject the pronoun, like Don started without it, I don't think Don's a terribly gracious or thankful person, just as the pronoun is missing when you started to thank them.
One question, I don't know if you've ever picked this up, if you've watched enough of Don's interviews, but one thing I wanted to ask you is, what I've noticed about Don is he has this ability to give an interview, especially when he was doing them a lot with like Chris McDonough. People will critique it. He'll pick up on those critiques, and the next time he talks, it'll be a whole different presentation. So if the behavior panel guys said, oh, he did this, he's going to do exactly the opposite or clear it up in some way. He's very astute to that.
Yeah,
so
great point. That's the element of manipulation.
Okay.
That's right there. It's a great example of manipulation.
I know somebody like that in my life who is very not self-aware and always the victim. And it's now after, this past year of immersing myself into like behavior and studying statement analysis and stuff like that, it doesn't make me as mad when I hear him talk. It's just kind of like, it's amusing. Like, okay, we're the victim again. All right, understand where you're coming from. So yes, okay. Yeah. It's interesting with Don that he does change. He's smart enough, or he's astute enough in the role of always being on guard and trying to project away guilt, that he's on his toes with fixing how he comes across. Most of us aren't.
I think that goes right back to his childhood. I think he's done a great deal of damage in this world. I'm not saying that it's beyond redemption. I think that he and Candace need to come clean to law enforcement and tell them what they know. Candace wasn't truthful about what happened. And Don is telling us right here in this statement, one of the greatest elements of this case is drugs. Drugs. I don't underestimate him. I think he's highly manipulative. I always caution in law enforcement, don't underestimate the opponent in the interview.
Do you believe that Candace has guilty knowledge? Like what I mean by everyone throws around the word guilty knowledge, but do you believe that she has forgotten, maybe through drug use or what has happened, that's a real forgetting, or can you tell?
I don't think she's telling the truth about that, about the loss of memory. Now, obviously, she has some cognitive limitations, and that is enhanced perhaps by substance abuse. She is very likely, very likely a victim of early child abuse, physical, emotional, very likely sexual, substance abuse, I think her mother was part of that in terms of going to the things that enter our language. You went down to the drugstore to pick up medication. Okay? Out of all things that can tell us that instead of just running errands, they have to tell that because it's on the mind. And I think that this is very sad, and sometimes it's hard for listeners to accept. There are mothers who are charged with failure to protect because they seemingly don't know any better, that they've been victimized themselves so much in life and in childhood that they fail to protect. And I think that, it's just my opinion, Don was sexually abusing Summer, and Candace has known about it. And I think worse things, but that's where I'll go.
We had a great question, right, Tiff? We had someone just asked.
Yes, the one about Candace. Yeah, hold on, let me pull it up. The polygraph one, you mean, or the other one? Yeah, okay. So it says, can you explain why they were able to pass polygraphs?
Has that been verified?
I don't think it has, actually, though. That's just from their words. But don't you think law enforcement would have corrected that if they were going around, even like in articles, it was said that they were given so many interviews? Do you think they would have corrected it or no?
Because it's such a public case, I think it's notable that they didn't come out and say anything. I think they have their doubts. So on the polygraph, I have a great deal of confidence in it. It does come down to the polygraph examiner. And it's important to ask questions using only their language, they being Candace and Don. If I introduce a word that's not part of their vocabulary, they're not familiar with, they're not comfortable with, it can skew the results. So the polygraph is as effective as its examiner or polygrapher, someone who is administering that. And if they do that, and it's very simple. I'm going to give you 5 questions. It's today, Tuesday, and that sort of thing. So there's no surprise where there's an emotional reaction or a hormonal response to a surprise. Nothing like that's coming. And some people, and it's rare, but I've dealt cases like that, will pass a polygraph, especially if they don't have a connection to the language. So that's really important. Good question, though.
Thank you, Marigold.
Thank you, Marigold. Should we bring up Candace's statement now, do you think, or do you want to ask more questions?
We should we finish that? I think we had like a couple.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I took that down.
Go. Yeah, I interrupted Peter with questions.
Okay.
I could go through the questions if you could.
Oh, go through them?
Okay, yeah, okay.
Wait.
So I'll start from...
You guys.
Julie Bibby says, do you think they are being loyal to their self? I kind of answered that a little bit, but... Yes,
the self-preservation. Say, this is a difficult issue. Go back to the question of guilt versus guilty knowledge. We call this in an analysis, a criminal analysis, attendant guilt. Attendant guilt is, I didn't kill the guy, but I did rob the body. And I don't want you to find out that I robbed the body, but I didn't kill him. So I'm showing like guilty knowledge of something that took place in this crime, but I really didn't kill him. They have what I believe is to be attendant guilt. And I think what they're withholding, both of them, but especially Candace and some of the interviews I've seen, is what Summer's life was like with them on drugs. And this is, and I don't know what happened to Summer, but this is a major concern I have. That when someone gets involved in drugs, they invite trouble into their lives. When a married couple gets involved in drugs, it becomes even worse. When a married couple with children get involved in drugs, now it's compounded further. When a married couple with children who live in a secluded area get involved with drugs, the children are open prey. So if, let's say that Candace did not kill Summer, her language shows guilt. Some form of self-preservation is happening there. I think it's related to drugs. And my fear is that, and this is so hard for some people to grasp, but the drugs desensitize. They build up not only a tolerance physically to the chemical, but an emotional tolerance. So someone can say, how could, I interviewed a woman once that traded her little daughter, maybe 7 years old at the time, on trains for cigarette money. Say, how can someone do that? My guess in this case is that they invited trouble into their lives and that they may have at times traded Summer for drugs, for money. And once that element enters into that property, so I think she's withholding, I think she's lying. She's withholding information about what happened. There's gaps there in her story that tell us, no, I'm not going there. I'm going to skip over that time. It's not that I'm forgetting. I'm just not going to go there. And I think that Summer had a life of abuse. And I'm willing to bet a cup of coffee for anybody that Child Protective Services feared the same thing. And after what happened to Summer, they did what they had to do to get those boys out of there. We always look for, we meaning society, and particularly Child Protective Services, we look for family placement. We look for a place where the kids can have the familiarity and the bonding with family, but be protected. And when that's not possible, and the children's lives are in jeopardy or at immediate risk of serious harm, which was, I think, evident was there, they know things or they suspect things, know and or suspect, and they have to take steps to protect those kids. And that's why you could see a reaction from me when it talks about being perfectly content. And he mentions Candace and the kids. So he's lying. There's no such thing as perfect contentment. It's no different than Scott Peterson.
This might be kind of off the, I don't know if you can answer this, but if in what we believe in our opinion, well, your opinion and I haven't expressed my opinion yet, but if, let's say, this was happening in the house and there was it was a lot of drug abuse, and the boys are obviously older than Summer and they've witnessed it and they're different ages. Do you think that there's so much damage done to those boys where, had it not been for intervention of Child Protective Services, that their path and they're being desensitized to violence or acts of violence would almost be guaranteed?
I think they probably experienced a lot of it already, and the intervention is late. What happens is, the reason that Child Protective Services doesn't come into your home or my home and rip out our children is because we have standards and laws to protect us. Those same laws, the child protective workers must prove to a judge in a preponderance of evidence that these things are taking place. And it does mean that someone gets lost in the system or someone is not pulled out fast enough, and the damage is going to be there, and then they try to mitigate it. But this is part of the very complicated human nature that we all have to deal with. It is not perfect contentment.
Is there a way to appeal through this language that you see with the way that Don writes, is there a way to appeal to him through, whether it be religion or guilt or whatever, and to Candace, to come clean, to maybe save their souls, to say where Summer is, to save their souls?
Yeah, great question. And I could be wrong with this, but the language that Don has used from the beginning, when it came to the language of religion, is subservient to him. He's using it. So I don't think an appeal, I think he would take that as a challenge, an appeal to confession, for truth, for seeking forgiveness, redemption. I don't know if he's beyond that. I don't know. I know that he's used the language of religion to poke at others, which seems to be his personality. Whatever happened to him early in childhood, he lives and hurts others. I also recognize, especially in the world of criminal analysis, that there are those people, whether we want to admit it or not, who don't sleep well until they've harmed others. It's just this. It's like a young social worker is all idealistic. Talk to them in 10 or 20 years and see how much more sober-minded they are. Law enforcement doesn't generally struggle with that. If you see a young law enforcement professional struggling like that, my guess is they're probably going to leave law enforcement. It's just too overwhelming. So, I don't want to write anyone off, but I don't think at this time, and this is dated early February, I believe, I don't think at this time going this direction. I think Chris Madonna was really close to them, and that was the most letting down of their guard I've seen. And even that, Don knows how to shut it down. So just it may not be necessary to state, but just in case it is, I have no association with this case. I have, whenever I have any association with law enforcement on a case, I don't comment about it or I don't write about it. This one I have none, and the things that I'm talking about are all public knowledge.
Yes, anytime Peter covers a case, he has nothing to do with it. When there's a case that he does cover, like you said, yeah, he never brings it up.
No, I don't even comment on it or say, I can't talk about that because that brings attention.
Yep.
What I do is, for law enforcement, for example, I will look at a statement and give an opinion on it. They're the ones that should be credited with it because they're the ones that are working day and night on those cases. Those are the ones that have to prove what I've been able to show them. And so it's wrong or my team is terrific like that. They don't want any credit. They don't want anything to be known. They practice confidentiality completely. But the professionals that are boots on the ground, they are the ones that are going to be cross-examined. They're the ones that have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. They're the ones that do the work. So when you see like this public information going on, then I'm free to comment. I think others are free to comment. When you see Don wanting to shut people down, so when I speak and I give you an opinion, people have a right to say, that guy's an idiot or that guy's really smart. I agree with him or I disagree with him. That is presupposed when anyone speaks publicly. And when someone wants to shut it down, they have a reason to need to shut it down. And that's Don and quite a few others.
I agree with you. Yeah. Okay.
So I'll say, in a public case, this person is deceptive. And it's happened on a few occasions where the person, through their attorney, has threatened to sue me. And my attitude is, go ahead. I get to ask questions. As my defense. Yeah, because what I'm doing is when you speak, I'm speaking through a computer or through a television, there's an expectation that some people will believe me, some people won't. They have a right to do those things. What I do with printed analysis is I will give an opinion whether I believe someone or disbelieve them and explain why. And for me, it makes sense. So I'm willing to assume that it'll make sense for a judge or a jury. Plus, I get to ask questions, which I love.
I don't blame you. I think that's one of the most fascinating parts of having the amount of knowledge that you have, is that you actually know the questions to ask to take it further. Like when you see the red flags, you know what to ask next to get further. I love that. When I want
a lot of what we do is to submit questions to law enforcement that can be used in the interview process. But even the submission of questions, it comes down to that law enforcement experience, instincts. No interview is perfect because they're on the fly. They're out there right off the bat. So we're very slow to criticize anybody. But hopefully the questions can be very helpful. We can even go as far as saying, right here, this person's lying. Here's where to target your questions.
I love that. Zav.
Okay, yeah, question. Amanda Wolf asks, so this must be something that you said. It says, you said Don is so deceptive, you can't tell when he is not being deceptive exactly. Have you been able to examine that further?
What I mean by that, and fair question, is that he is so enmeshed in substance abuse, and I thought the behavioral panel did a great job with this. They were so restrained with their analysis because he is constantly defensive. He has served time in prison. He's had a really hard, bad life. And so it is very difficult throughout what he does is to know where the guilt is. So what I mean about deception is you can assume in a lot of places he's being deceptive, but regarding Summer's disappearance, it can be tricky because he can be lying about the child molestation, the domestic violence, the weapon, the sexual abuse, all different things. It's difficult to pin him down. I think he knows it too.
He's that good at it that he knows it.
No one has asked me until today how I might approach him in the interview, and I'm not sure. That's something I probably seek a consensus from others after watching him so long. I think he is so hardened and so closed off and so manipulative. So I have to think about that strategy. That's a great question.
Now, there's been a couple comments about the photos. Are you aware of these photos, Bella or Peter? It says, hello, Peter. I'm wondering if you have looked at the dark web type photos Candace Wells posts. I'm not sure if you're aware. I'm not even aware of that, to be honest.
Thankfully, I don't know where the dark web is. So
it's like underground World Wide Web where we don't have you kind of have to know hacking skills or be invited, and it's where like dark things live, right? So snuff films and being able to view underage children, purportedly that,
But it says type photos, so maybe that's just. Yeah, I don't know, Marion, can you explain what photos you're talking about, maybe?
What I reference with the dark web, I know what it is. Departments specifically trained for child pornography, officers, and generally speaking, and this will depend upon the size, the budget, everything else, an officer will be assigned for a limited time to examine child pornography because the impact is so horrible on that officer. And so they have a certain threshold they look for in terms of underage, so it's not like borderline, but the true pedophilia that circulates on the dark web. I don't know of any officer that has stayed long term in that. It impacts them. It can impact their health, mental health, physical health. It's horrible. And so they're able to have to rotate it out from that sort of thing.
Okay, so Gabby's mom says, what can be said about the tenses used in statements? Candace used present tense for past tense. So I walk over here and watch Summer go into the house as opposed to walked and watched.
We call that unreliable. Now, there are some people that will use present tense routinely, but it's not reliable in terms of commitment. Now, if they go back and forth, that becomes even more so alarming. And I think what Candace was doing was being deceptive while being manipulative. Remember about the washing of the hands and the candy? Okay, who washes their kids' hands? A good person. Who gives a child candy? A loving grandmother. The need to portray the good guy in what the questioner is referencing often suggests to the contrary.
It becomes like a doth protesteth too much, right? Where you're drawing too much attention to something that's ordinary, that should just be ordinary, right?
Yeah, would you even think about washing hands after gardening? Would that come back into the language? Because we all do it. You know, like the reference to someone when they're talking about their day and they said, then I brushed my teeth. That is an example that we use of unnecessary information. Unless there was a dental problem that they were talking about, it shouldn't enter their language. And generally speaking, it will be an indicator for us that that person is concealing information of a personal nature, or private nature.
Wow.
So the washing of the hands entered her language. I think it may be a reference back to sexual abuse. What I can't tell you whether it was of Summer, which I think, or was this in her language because of her own, Candace's own history as a child. Those are things I'd explore for.
Very complicated on both sides of on Candace's side and Dawn's side, very complicated family histories of pronounced abuse and where it's become normalized in their family, and just kind of looked at as like, hey, that's just like a shrug of the shoulders. We're in normal.
Where for someone else it's so shocking that it comes up to the language. In Don's religious language of the hate versus love back and forth, when he's comparing the two, I think that he would likely use religious language to justify lying the way people do. I need to protect Candace. I need to protect the boys, because he knows that Summer is not living. That's, to me, an indicator of ongoing abuse that took place in her first 5 years of her life. He could use that and say, look how I'm doing God's will, protecting my boys.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Protecting the family. So everything's justified in the protection of the family. Very good point.
The McCanns, the Madeline McCann parents, if they come clean and say this was an accident because we gave her Benadryl or something like that, they could have said to themselves, our other children will be taken away, and we have to protect them, and we'll lose our patients, and our patients need us in our professions, and that sort of thing. They justify, and that's what human nature is. We try to justify everything we do.
Amazing points.
I have friends that I sometimes refer to as the devil I know, meaning that they're just honest. They're honest people. They're honest with their faults. They're honest with their goodness, and I trust them because they're not putting on a show. Don is a walking, talking show, and if you pull the curtain back a little bit, boy, does he get angry.
Which leads to Crash Landing's amazing question here. Tiff, are you muted?
No,
okay.
I'm not. Do you think Don's religious views are sincere?
At this point, I don't. Because thus far, and this point being the last 6 months or however long it's been, longer than that, it has been used to poke at others and push away guilt. Whereas even the Greek word for confession means to say the same, to agree, to be honest, to be truthful. And we haven't seen that in him. He uses this to attack others, to condemn others, and to divert. So Forgive me if I'm wrong about that, and maybe things will change, but right now I don't. And this is an expression, I hope this is not offensive to anyone, because contextually it's accurate, but we call it Born-Again-Ism, where someone goes through a hard time, they declare themselves to be born again, meaning a new heart, and then they return back to celebrity and cast away all that they claimed during that crisis period. So they're using a language that they don't own, and they're using it for the purpose of manipulation. And they could be trying to convince themselves. And then you run also the risk of someone who is genuine in their beliefs, who's struggling, because life is not perfectly content. It's difficult. So sometimes we can see where someone is using a type of language that is not just immature, but they're using it in a way to protect themselves from maybe a criminal guilt and to harm others. That's manipulative.
Oh, thank you, Gabby's mom.
Thank
you guys. Balanced and informative. Thank you so much.
Peter is one of our favorite guests, if not our favorite guest. Seriously, we love having Peter on. Solo
right.
MCFC. Hi, Solo. Okay.
Do you think law enforcement are waiting for Don or Candace to trip themselves up? Like when you say give them a rope to...
I do. I think that they probably have very strong opinions. I think it's related to drugs and chronic abuse of Summer, but they're responsible for proving it. And what they don't want to do, and sometimes causes a little bit of consternation dealing with the district attorney, is they don't want to bring a case they can't prove. So they also have to fight their own emotions. They may very much dislike these people, and they can't let that interfere. A lot of times the bad guy didn't do it, and our heroes, they did it. So we have to step back and have a certain amount of confidence. And it's hard at times because we want justice, and this case gripped us all. The little girl's cute face and the poverty and everything else just gripped us. And people are here because they want justice. But I do trust that law enforcement professionals are working on that, keeping a careful eye out, and always looking for new evidence. Things come out.
You have faith in Tennessee's in TBI. Do you, Peter?
I do. There are men and women there that if you cut them, they believe protect and serve. That's who they are. And they are parents, and they are angry, and they are outraged, and they are sad, and they all the same experiences that someone outside of the investigation experiences, generally speaking, more so inside because they know more. They lose sleep over these things, and they have to somehow dissociate enough at home to carry on. That's why when you see politicians demonizing cops, and they're doing it for their own gain, it makes that job so much worse. So much worse. Think of all the things they see and all the things they deal with. And every time they pull someone over, will that person pull a gun? Every time they answer a domestic and knock at that door. And things go wrong, and there are people that should never be in law enforcement, but the vast majority have the DNA of protection to serve. They have to. If they could do something else and make more money, they still won't. They have to protect and serve. And so when you see that type of, even a quiet from them, they don't want the shame of not solving a crime. They're working on it.
It's good to know. I think it also helps reassure a lot of people in the public that we're so used to seeing things happen so fast online, and we don't remember how things work in law enforcement and in the justice system, I should say. Things are slow. Hopefully we will find Summer, and we could appeal. Hopefully what do you think about this, Peter? Actually, this is, I want your take on this. Is Dawn is gone away for a few months, 10 months to a year, depending for this DUI charge. Candace is without her daughter, without her sons, without Dawn now, do you think that there could be something that moves her without the protective male in the house?
I do. I think it might be an opportunity, especially if they're divided, where she'd be more willing to speak. I don't know what the grandmother spoke of, but she'd be another one that I'd want to talk to. The problem being is that there is sometimes a mentality of circle the wagons, or it could be even for the mother-in-law, Don's going to be out in a few months, that sort of thing. So that could be a fear factor there. So it would mean if he were to go away for a longer time, I think we'd get to the bottom of this. So great point.
Fingers crossed that something touches either of their hearts to speak, or anybody that knows anything to speak on this, because I think the mentality, hopefully I'm wrong, but if the mentality is that Summer is gone, there's nothing more we can do, if that's the mentality that the parents have. We're here to preserve ourselves going forward. That's not in keeping with the godly ways and getting something off your chest and confession. And I know that, Don does wear his religion like a cloak, and it is like a mask, but I know that they watch things on and off, and if they do get this, I plead with them for the sake of their daughter to just come clean, for the sake of their sons, because they will grow up to be men, and it is important to break the cycle and show them what a good person's like.
And so the appeal would be to Candace, you could get your sons back by telling the truth. We'll protect you. We'll get different services, do all this, that sort of thing. And what sometimes happens, often that's a great motivation for a mother, but what sometimes happens, depending on how long the abuse and the life of degradation has been going on, is they don't always care. It was a hard lesson for me decades ago, where a mother is pleading for her newborn child, and my heart's ready to break, and the mother doesn't show up for any of the bonding time. She wants the state to say, you're unfit mother, because she doesn't want the burden. And that really does happen. I know it's difficult for people to embrace, and it was difficult for me to embrace. I probably needed to see it with my own eyes to convince me that people can be that hardened. Candace seems pretty hardened, but I still think that might be approach.
Do you find her more hardened than Dawn?
No, he's really out there. He's really out there. I wouldn't be surprised if he made more attempts on his own life. I know that.
While in prison? While in jail?
No, when he's out, it's difficult to conceive how he can find a reason to get up every morning. That's how beat down he was. When I'm back to the behavior panel, it impressed me how restrained they were and how strongly contextual they were with him. They knew that he's going to have slumping shoulders because of his life. And so where an average person, you see the change in the body language, you might rush to guilt over that crime, whereas they were restrained about it, and they made allowances for what was really has been a tragic and harmful life. I was impressed.
And you also do that. I'm impressed with how the behavior panel, and you do that where you take in cultural, and like you will take in, well, if drugs are involved, there's this and there's allowances. Everything isn't cookie cutter. They do the same thing where culture plays, and that's what me and Tiff were always doing in the beginning of this case, is trying to give them a buffer, because we don't maybe understand the culture. I'm in LA, Tiff is in Ohio. We don't live in a very rural place. You grow up different. Kids run out barefoot, in LA, no one's running out barefoot out here. Kid might get snatched. Like, no one does that. So we had to give allowances for that. And I really appreciate and credit you for giving that. It's kind of like giving grace, but it's smart, right? Because when you're looking at cases, you can't just cookie cutter them. And you teach us so much, Peter. I mean, I think more than you even realize, you teach us so much. So thank you.
We had a child go missing in Australia, and Colin Ector, an analyst there, had said, "Hey, I think we should cover this case. The mom is telling the truth." And there were some things that mom was tripping over. And I think there was a little bit of guilt about this or that, but she didn't cause the child's disappearance. And as time went on, there's almost like a public pressure to say, "Hey, Colin, you're wrong on this one." And the child was found alive. And it wasn't the mother at all.
Are you talking about little Cleo from?
Yeah, on the language alone, he knew. This is Colin Ector I'm talking about. He did a good job putting things out, but he also had to, when we worked out as a team, he also had to help us understand some of the things in the Australian culture. You know, one of the things I said was, who wants to bring a young baby to the beach in a tent? You know, what a disaster. And he said, no, this is very common, and people will have beer there, and this is, you know, part of the culture. So that was something that was very helpful. So we look for that, including regionalism in the United States. Internationally, we have to have it, where I will check with analysts from the Southeast, for example, on certain language points, which is different than New England, where I am, or the West Coast. So it's very helpful to have that type of input all around, and it makes for some good debate and good work done on analysis.
I love that. Thank you, Georgina. Tiff, do you want to read that one?
Sorry, I'm just trying to keep up with chat. Okay, so I'm trying to get all the questions. Oh yeah, I have a good question. And this is a statement I didn't know that Candace even said, but I guess a few people have been talking about it. So let me find it. Where is it? Right here. It says, Peter, insight on Candace's statement. I guess she said, if I had just walked her out. This is a new statement she made on YouTube. So there's a few people that asked that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'd like to see the whole statement, but
I know. Where can we find it, Gailey?
I thought she did walk her out. It was the whole purpose of giving the description of the length between them, and she actually slowed down the pace, which tells us what comes after the statement is after that portion of the statement is probably problematic.
Here, let me.
Because if it's an ordinary day, you're not going to watch a 5-year-old go just a few short feet.
Yeah.
You're not going to describe it. It's not even in your memory. She went in the house. I watched her walk, and that sort of slowing down the pace. I would, you know, just without knowing the full statement there, I'd still like to go back to that area and wonder if she's trying to relive that, emphasizing it.
I would love to see you interview her.
I know. Me too. Actually, somebody has a question about where is it? Kind of relates to that. 1 second. Where is it? We got so many questions. I'm trying to just oh, here we go. If you were consulting with law enforcement about techniques to use on Don and Candace, what would you recommend to get at the truth? This is from Gloria and Dellen.
I think they have to be separated, and she has to be made safe. But I think it would be a very tall order. Going over the words very carefully, even in the chit chat section, you know, where the bonding is being made, I'd listen very carefully to the language she uses and want to reflect that language back. But I think that she would have to see that, you know, like Don just got 20 years for something. He's not coming out. That would be a chance that she might come clean.
So Z asks, Mr. Hyatt, the behavior panel found Don Wells being honest. So are you disagreeing? Also, by the way, they passed their Yeah, a lot of people were saying that Dr. Phil even said they passed the polygraph. So maybe he's just trying to, I don't know. If does Dr. Phil really know, do you think?
They were saying in chat that the officer Lawson.
Oh, Lawson, thank you. They did say Lawson said that too.
Okay.
That's right. That they passed, I guess. I don't know.
And we'd have to know what questions they were asked. I'll get to the behavior panel in a moment. Did you kill your daughter? Or did you cause her death? Now, let's just say that my scenario is correct, where they invited by their actions the unsavory criminal element of drugs, people who are desensitized due to drugs, and one of them snatched her. They can say, I didn't cause her disappearance, I'm telling the truth, that sort of thing, and pass a polygraph. It doesn't tell the whole story, though. Let's say my scenario is correct. I don't. Now, with the behavioral panel, what they were talking about specifically was about Dawn not causing her death or disappearance. I think that's what they were addressing there. And that's why they made all the allowances, appropriately so, for his beatdown in life.
And they said that Candace had guilty knowledge.
And Candace did? Okay.
Yeah. That there was something that she needed to remember, and that was triggering to her. Because if you guys remember what that Scott asked about, and it was made into such a big deal, Scott had asked about the cornbread mafia, and that's when she got upset. So everyone attributed it to, okay, so there's a trigger with the cornbread mafia, there's something with that, but maybe it was just she felt, like she said, interrogated. She didn't think she was there for an interrogation. She thought she was there to get help. So
yeah, if her motive is to get Summer back, there's less care about being interrogated, whatever it takes. Exactly. Don's language in the very beginning, he went past tense on his own daughter. He was called on it and even admitted, well, I guess I'm thinking that. Yes. He also used religious language to place her up in heaven. Not that she doesn't belong in heaven, but at that time, she didn't belong anywhere but alive on the earth, unless he believed something. So I think that, like, even if it was just guilt of a drug dealer that I purchased from before came back and snatched her, right, they can say, we didn't cause her disappearance, we didn't hurt her. Right. It doesn't mean you didn't invite the trouble in.
Very true. Okay. Marigold has is that a question?
I guess Don said he felt sorry for searchers wasting time because Summer was far away from there. So that's kind of interesting. I didn't realize he said that.
He had processed her death. So there are things that he knows that are associated with whoever came over there. Remember, he also has to protect himself. What I believe, they were sleeping in the same bed, him and the little girl. He with a predation history. That's heartbreaking.
And he did process her death, and it seemed like it was very quickly, because he had said that this is the day she went missing, June 15th. He got the call from Candace. He drove. He said, I don't remember his exact words. Since we're talking language, I want to be really correct, but something like a bat out of hell. He drove so fast. He got there, and then he saw his boys on one side of the field in front of his house searching. And he said, I knew in that instant Summer was gone. And that's kind of, in my opinion, fast for a father to process a child being dead. And Peter, you've said in the past about when a doctor comes out and tells a parent that they've lost a child. Wasn't that you? I think that was you, right?
Yeah, it isn't something that the parental capacity can accept without being worn down.
Yes.
It is more powerful in females than it is in males. In males, because the male protects, it is an affront to the parental instinct that the child wasn't protected. We have to be convinced of it, and that takes time to wear it down in fact and detail. A woman is even more difficult to bring around to accept that. There are mothers today who will not accept the missing child being deceased and have struggled for year after year after year, because that mama bear instinct is so powerful. It's so powerful. So generally speaking, men will go into the past tense before women will, but even they have a hard time. Don had no problem. Don knew people were on his property that shouldn't have been on that property. People were in their lives that shouldn't have been in their lives. He knew that, and he knows it now.
So they were talking about, I guess they asked her, it was a interview or a video where they asked her, what would you have done different? Or wait, no. I guess if she would have walked her out from the basement, is that, Mel, are you understanding what they're saying about that? They're trying to explain why she said that. So maybe
talking what ifs.
But walked her out, I guess. I don't know. I'm confused. So yeah, just disregard that last statement. I'm not sure.
You still also have the one you typed up too, Zav. That was a good what she actually said.
Yeah, what you sent me, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let me bring that up. We typed it up. It's not that long. But she had made this. When was this, Bella? It's on a video.
I don't know if it was 2 or 3 days ago. So Candace, for everyone who doesn't know, has her own channel now. So Dawn and Candace have their channel. Candace now has her own channel. And for a minute, it was kind of rogue where Tim Mullen wasn't, I think, monitoring it. And then Tim Mullen, as of, I believe, 2 days, maybe 36 hours ago, was like monitoring it. So this got removed. She was in a hotel room and she was just talking about parts of her life. She was chatting in a live. And this is just something she said. And
since I typed this up, I can't make it bigger, but I could read it to you if you want.
You'd have to, I can't see it.
I know it's so small. I should have made the font bigger, but let me see if I could change it real quick. I don't know. I think with this one, I can't. Let me see if I can just. Did that work? No, I don't know. Okay, let me try to read it. It says, you can love somebody and not be in love with somebody all at the same time. And then to a lot of people, I know there's going to be a lot of haters that's going to be hating on me for this. Okay, I can handle it. I miss my daughter Summer with all my heart and soul, and I would, if she'd come back safe and alive and sound, I would trade my body, my heart, my soul for her to come back. I don't know where she is, and I miss her very much. I miss my boys very much, and I really don't know what else to say tonight, but I hope everyone has a safe and wonderful weekend.
The word that jumps out to me is trade. That's my fear that what Summer was put through.
Oh, yeah. Wow. And look, notice she said I would trade my body first. That's wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It may even be what took place in Candace's life, maybe early on even. These things repeat themselves so horribly. That word is very alarming to her vocabulary. Those are the type of things I listen to. And like if I was interviewing her and I would use the word trade and I would ask her to tell me about it, and I'd want to go to her childhood, and what I'm looking for is that blind spot where someone is so desensitized to something that horrific that instead of looking through the lens of I protected my children, I protect my grandchildren, someone that culturally didn't and doesn't see the importance of it. I haven't seen her in the interviews. I haven't seen someone I felt was very strong with human empathy. She seems mostly concerned about herself.
And that, Peter, was kind of a response, in my opinion. And I don't know, because there's so much, I can't catch everything, and I don't catch everything about Summer. I try to stick with the facts and news and stuff like that. But every once in a while, I'll catch something. So she had done a previous statement on a live, and another YouTuber had caught that she didn't mention the boys or Summer. The question was something, and this is hearsay, everybody. I didn't hear it myself. I heard it through another YouTuber. The question was about if you could have any desires, what would they be? And this is recent, after Dawn has been locked up. And she basically said to have my house in order was her first desire. And so this YouTuber had called this out, saying, wouldn't your first desire be to have Summer found or safe, or your boys even? So I feel that this somehow got back to, and this is just my opinion, I feel that this somehow got back to Candace, and this was an amend, just like Dawn does. He does a lot of amending. The next interview will always be addressing and bettering his last statement. This is what this kind of felt like to me. And so I wanted to, since we were going to have you on, have you look at it, because it says that if, what was the statement again, Tiff? That if that sentence with the trade in it was like, if I could have Summer back.
It says, hold on, it says, if she'd come back safe and alive and sound, I would trade my body, my heart, my soul for her to come back. And then she says B, and then I don't know what she meant by that. She just said B, I don't know where she is, and I miss her very much. I miss my boys very much, and I really don't know what else to say tonight.
Come back. Can Summer come back in her world, in her language? Is it Summer's responsibility? Is it Summer's fault? That sort of thing. And this is what human nature does, is especially those that are indulged into that, being allowed to, by some parental authority, to blame others and to not take personal responsibility. Things they don't learn it when they're young, they don't show it when they're older. I think that the person that wrote back criticizing that, saying, "What should it be, Summer first, the boy second?" She knows where the boys are, and she doesn't know where Summer is, and I think that may be true. Summer should be first, and then getting the boys back would be second. And if Don caused any of this through any of his behavior, even peripherally, then not him. If his behavior got my boys taken away, then not him. So getting the house back in order, and I agree, I think they probably do amend when they read the criticism. You know how she talks about things don't bother her, she doesn't pay attention? She really does. Quite the opposite.
Yeah, so that did stand out. Okay, we'll get some more of your questions, guys.
Okay, let's see.
Someone wrote, come back to life. And even that she could have said, if she believed that Summer was deceased. I want my daughter back. I want her alive. I think that's a fair criticism.
And that was early on, too, in Dawn's statements was, I will see my daughter in the resurrection. And I felt that was kind of like, what? Wait, like basically I'm obviously paraphrasing because language is so important. I just want to make sure, but it was like, no, it doesn't matter. Summer's in good hands. That's the gist of what I got from what he was saying, and I'll be reunited with her in the resurrection. So it was kind of like that's the justifying. It just felt like another justifying, qualifying statement.
Yeah, it is to accept that she's dead and she's not going to be seen until the end.
Oh, go ahead.
When we lose someone, it takes time. Even an elderly loved one who is in hospice care, it's not surprising when they die, but it's still often shocking. The finality of it. It shocks the senses. I've been waiting this for months, and I've been watching him deteriorate. It still comes as a shock, although no surprise. Hope that makes sense.
That's a great way of putting it.
Sorry, I'm typing a comment. Okay, so Glorin Dallin says there was one time in the first joint interview where Don starts out in present tense, then corrects himself to past tense. Thoughts?
I think he was aware of what he was doing. He was once criticized by it for using her in past tense, and then went to correct himself into present tense. Later on, he went back to the past. So I think it indicates it's not that he is manipulative. It's not always a tool of manipulation, because self-correction can be a sign that someone's telling the truth. We misspoke, we corrected, that sort of thing. Given the context and given what we know about him from other statements, I think it more shows manipulation.
Lauren Dellin has a bunch of good questions. So do you think this case is too muddled to ever result in a successful prosecution?
I do not. I do not. I think that when someone speaks on television, there's a reason why defense attorneys say don't speak. And some of the things that puzzle us now, when this case is solved, myself included, we'll be able to look back at certain things they said in the language, and it'll make sense to us. Right now, we're still mystified, and I don't know what happened to Summer. I believe what happened to Summer is related to drugs, somewhere along the line.
Great point. Yeah.
No drugs, she's still alive.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay. What about another Glorin? Oh my God. So what do you make of Candace's meltdown at the mention of the cornbread mafia?
Oh, I think that was the area of drugs. And it's difficult for me, for you, for the audience to accept how jaded, how cold, how indifferent people become under drugs. How desensitized, how they lose their soul in that sense. And they do really terrible things.
The point, kind of, I find, to drugs is to numb yourself out. Like for instance, for me, why I ended up becoming a drug addict was I was always so I felt so much empathy for everything. And it was the only time that I absolutely got some kind of relief. And it was like I was numb. And so I think that it's kind of this escape, not for everybody, obviously. There's other reasons maybe people have. It might not be empathy that they're running from. It might be fear or, any kind of emotion. But I think it is that sense of wanting to shut out emotions. Whereas now it's like, I welcome,
We've seen a tremendous increase across the nation in substance abuse. We've seen a tremendous increase in overdoses in spite of all the education that's going on. So someone is very stressed as they see governments take away their freedom, wondering when it's going to end, where it's going to end. And it's only going to be 2 weeks, and the 2 weeks turned into 2 years. And they're very stressed. The incivility is increased. They go home, they have a beer, they have another one, and they feel a little better about it. The next day, the stress is still there, and the repetition starts, and that which has been relieving stress now becomes a bad habit. And for some, and this is the way cops usually say it in terms of drugs, is always chasing that first high where everything was right with the world. It's never the same again. It's never the same again. When you see people whose, even a small microculture has given over to this is their lives. They do things that I don't think they would have done without the drugs, without the numbing of the soul.
Yeah.
They lived in a different culture than even as the interview room camera across the place. People look at, why don't you clean that up? Why don't you, you know, there is a type of hopelessness that says, well, let me obtain this expensive item that I can't afford because everything gets taken away from me anyway. And then the item that they got, which probably wasn't fully paid for, rots outside. So there's like this complex human relationship. I need to provide for my kids what I didn't have. And then like a hopelessness that just says, oh, it's all going to go to hell anyway, so don't take care of it. Wow. Whereas, like you see a teenager who works really hard, saves all his money and buys a junky car that he paid for himself. And he's out there scrubbing the car and keeping it clean and taking really good care of it because he paid for it himself. When you see someone who games the system, who lives off others, there's no emotional satisfaction of providing for your own kids. Do that year after year and watch what it turns into. It destroys. We're not built that way.
This is like so insightful on even just like a personal level. It's just so bizarre, Peter. I didn't even think I'd be accessing these parts of my brain this morning. Thank you for that. Yeah. Linda.
Oh, you waiting for me to read it? Sorry.
Oh.
Linda asks, do you think Candace was jealous of all the attention Summer got? Would Candace resent Summer for how much Dawn loves Summer?
I do, and yes, to the questions. That is, for us, a very childish, clinically immature view, but I think that was her world. And by asking that question, that person is saying that she likely saw that, whether it be in the language or the body language. I agree. I've said that also from the beginning. I was concerned about the hair. Their explanation of the hair changed this and that. I wondered, and this again, I don't know, did Candace do that to her hair out of jealousy and wanting attention from Dawn herself? Did Candace do that to the hair? Some others do this to try to make the child look unappealing to a molester. So I don't know, but the person that answered that question, the commentator here, that's an astute question. That's one that needs answers. Answers, plural, and exploration. So really good question.
Great question, Linda. And you have said that before, Peter, you had thought that and it was very early on, and it was great insight into a way that we don't normally see mothers behaving with their children, where like they would have to take that kind of precaution too, because maybe can't, my opinion only, everybody, maybe she had been through it. So she knew the things that would deter it.
She could even say to herself, I have to teach her to survive. She's got to learn. A toddler walks over to a toaster and we jump out of our chair and rush over. The parents who, especially those in the haze of substance abuse, that allow the child to go, he's got to learn. I learned it that way. He's got to learn. Are very different culturally from the rest of us. They look in the mirror, and what they see and what we see are two different things sometimes.
Mom to 4 asks, how much is a person's past behavior factored into a statement? There's a camp of people who get very angry when Don's past is brought up.
Don's past is who he is. And if someone is genuinely interested in solving this, it has to be explored. The older I get, the more I recognize from childhood things that came back to me, things that I end up going back to that I left when I was a young adult. That's human nature. That's life. So when someone gets angry that Don's past is being explored, it's a faux morality. it's misplaced. It's not. They probably don't want something in their own past to be brought up. None of us do. I like to ask people about being given a do-over in life, and there will be some people that will say, "I wouldn't change a thing, for I am who I am," and which is the most ridiculous thing to say, because could you think about a time when you said something that was uncharitable to someone and it really hurt them that you wish you could take it back? Do you wish you had been a better student? Do you wish you had been a better son or a daughter? And the flip side of that is you don't want to become awash in despair, but neither do you want to be egotistical. Push all that aside. We have a crime that's taken place. We have a little girl that's missing. If this past opens a door for us to walk through and say, there's our answer, we need to go through it. We need to knock and maybe push it in if we have to, but it's there. So that type of, I call it a full morality, where I appear like I'm non-judgmental. I'm judging others who don't agree with me. I'm terribly judgmental.
It's a great point.
Heather says, I'm always wrong, but that's what's so right about me. Just the irony, the humor of that.
I love that. Should get merch made like that, Peter. Your next merch line.
That's a good one. So Robin Lane says, I'd like to know if Peter has any thoughts about Robin Lane, if he's seen her or speak at all. If he's seen her speak at all. Are you aware of Robin? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
She's the really pretty woman who is in church. Have you seen videos with her yet, Peter? She's like Summers seemed to gravitate towards her because she seemed like a nurturer and like feminine. Sometimes little girls also just like feminine women. But yeah.
Was she in the church?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I only saw a little bit of it, and she seemed to be as described, as someone that was nurturing and maybe someone that Summer would have confided in over time.
Over time, when she got older.
Yeah, but I think you're right. Even the videos were short and there wasn't a lot there, but I had wondered whether Summer found a safe place to go, a harbor, in all the chaos that wasn't the home.
Yeah.
And I'd seen how the Seventh-day Adventist and the Baptist churches both opened up their hearts, both sought to support law enforcement searchers. People were, I think, responded very well. And I say the same thing with Chris Madonna. They turned on people. They used them and turned on people in a lot of ways. I thought the interview with the neighbor boy was fascinating. I think there was more to it than that. His mother was there. There was just a lot of dynamics going on. But it's not surprising that people like Don and Candace would burn bridges, including accusations. There's one point where I forget what he accused Chris of, and Chris said, but I didn't say that, and I don't say that. I don't believe that. But for Don, he's a victim. He'll make the language fit.
And then Chris calmed him down in that, right? Like, so Chris was just calm in that, and Don was yelling, and Chris was like, I didn't say that. And he goes, well, blah, blah. And then like calmed down by the end of that. Okay, brother. And they ended with this whole, okay, brother.
I generally don't like anyone to call me brother unless they're my brother, because it usually means something's coming.
Do you think Hunter or Allie are aware of any of that or anything? Do you think they held back any information? I
do. And I think it has to do with substance abuse and that culture. And when you're dealing with, this is one of the close peripherals, you're dealing with attendant guilt, which is really difficult to discern from guilty knowledge, where they may be protecting themselves as drug users, underage alcohol, child pornography, all the typical suspects there in those type of cultures. So they keep their mouth shut on certain things, but they love the attention. And this is the sad part, it allows someone not only to get attention, but to give a little bit of relief to themselves by putting someone else down. And I thought I saw that and heard that in the interview with the boy and his mom, taking some shots at the neighbors.
That they were putting, that the boy and Allie, the mother, were putting somebody else down, or is that what you know?
Yeah, they could throw shade at Don and Candace to feel better about themselves. So not only are they getting attention, but they can feel better about themselves.
Do you think
I think that the sexualization of the culture in that house, the culture of the house, was dynamic. From the sexual abuse of the little girl, who knows what those boys have seen. Maybe CPS does know, maybe that's why they're out of there, to Candace herself. And unfortunately, with Don, he could be physically impotent, age, health, everything else, and still make attempts to molest, still relive that past. I was reading about those who were caught up in a child pornography dragnet by law enforcement, and the youngest was 19 of the males. The oldest was 78.
it's normalized we might not understand that, but it's so normalized to them. And sometimes it's normalized. They normalized it. So it's not odd. And like you said, it's their culture. It's kind of almost becomes like a ritual, in the way that it is, in my opinion. But do you think that Allie, the mother of the boy,
what about her?
do you feel that because she had to know what was going on in that household, and that because her son would post, like sometimes Candace would post, and it seemed kind of the boy was a little bit too young to be hanging out with someone like Candace. And do you think that there's anything with the way that Allie answered that might be red flags?
I do. I just can't tell whether it is self-preservation guilt or more. I just can't tell the difference at this point.
What about
I don't
Hunter?
think that they had anything to do with it.
Okay, you don't think Hunter, and nothing happened when Hunter was with them?
No, I'm concerned that he may have been involved with Candace. I wondered about that.
Yeah.
Specifically, Hunter's mother, I think she not only enjoyed the attention, but I think she enjoyed throwing the shade on the others. Takes things off herself.
Oh, brains. Muted.
Well, you should go through the starred ones and see, because I know he's answered a lot of them, and I don't want to just have him repeat stuff.
Okay.
So I'll ask you this one, and then Bella, maybe you could go through the other ones in there and see. But so do you think we will get to see or hear evidence in this case, like 911 calls, phone info, video footage from stores, hospital interviews? Because they haven't released anything yet.
Eventually we will. Don was pretty confident in his alibi, and that may have helped him pass through a polygraph and being away. But I think that her initial reluctance with 911 and having to call him, that sort of thing, the back and forth that went on there is going to be significant.
Here's Marigold. Tiff, take it
Okay,
away.
Marigold asks, do you think Don or Candace will confess or rat on each other?
I would take the latter. One would rat on the other. I think that the best hope would be Candace.
Okay.
I think there'd be a lot of blaming of each other, not for causing the death, but for inviting in the trouble.
Okay. Do you think Don? Oh, yeah, you think they were both, in your theory, they were both aware of what they were doing with Summer then, right? It wasn't just one or the other.
Candace would have to see that her daughter is sleeping in the same bed as a man who has molested and allow that. And not, because one of the things that Child Protective Services tries to do is to avoid court and say, Candace, will you agree to keep Don out of the household because of this went on, that went on, and that's, they couldn't do that. They couldn't bring an agreement with her. They would not have to have confidence, or they would have lacked the confidence in her that she's going to protect if that was indeed the case. Because the boys would be willing to say, yeah, Summer always slept with Dad, that sort of thing. To them, it would be normalized as well.
Yeah. Okay, so another Glorindellen question. Which is most likely to have happened given their language? Familial trafficking, a family member caused Summer's death, or she wandered off?
I don't think she wandered off. I think she would have been located. And I think Don was actually truthful. I thought about that in terms of even Summer's fear of wildlife. I'm just guessing at this point. In this circle of their culture that is saturated in substance abuse, not thinking like we do, I think that you call them the mafia or whatever nickname they want to have, that someone involved with drugs grabbed her. And it could be for trafficking, could be for revenge, could be for lack of payment, could be for a lot of reasons. But my belief is no drugs, Summer's alive, one way or another. I also worried a little bit about the possibility of accidental overdose. But I think there would have been probably more forensic evidence to grab there. But something is related to drugs.
Ashley Leith has a question.
Okay, so Candace stated law enforcement is keeping her out of the loop with the newest search. What could the reasons be? Just so she won't talk, or to see how she acts over it?
The latter. They're wisely keeping her out. They probably very much know that she's withholding information. Even passing specific questions doesn't mean someone's not withholding information. And to withhold is an act of the will. It's not like, oh, I forgot. Alcoholic blackouts, we don't seem to be able to recover them. She's withholding information.
Okay. And Gailey says, Peter, what's your thoughts in regards to Candace never speaking wonderful thoughts or memories of Summer? Her statements are all generic and devoid of compassion and detail.
I agree with the observation, and I think it's due to self-preservation. It's also insight into her personality, probably her background as well, that she is not speaking as an average mother or loved one even would. That she is dissociated, she is numb, she is desensitized. And I think that observation and the question is likely insight into what Summer's world was like and why Summer may have wanted to cling to the nice young woman at church.
And Lisa Lee says, what does he think about Don saying he always knew something would happen to Summer and Candace's care?
I think that's where maybe the opening would be to allow them to blame each other once they're safely apart with some degree of strength. You know, coming out a couple months is not strong. But I think that's the opening. Good question.
Which leads us to Raquel Beachy's question.
Oh, yeah. What do you think about Don saying, I've got 7 alibis, Candace has none. She's going down.
Yeah, there we go. The one thing you can count on him, and that may be insight into strategy, is the allowance of blaming others. And if you can stir any trouble between the two, we may get more information. To me, that when I hear something like that, I look at, does this affirm my opinion? Does it negate my opinion, or does it not address it? Unless we do the same thing with analysis. And that sounds like an addict who knows that it was the circulation of drugs around them that caused this. Whether anything from Candace being passed out, or the actual entrance into the property of a drug dealer, or a drugged out person, that sort of thing. Things went bad there with drugs.
Peter, do you have an opinion on this? Polythene Pam.
Why are many spectators, in this case, backing the parents? Why do people disregard people with criminal past of such magnitude?
I think a lot of the people that do that are indeed good people who cannot help but project their own protective nature over their children. And it takes a bit of sobering to get past that. For example, and I've done this in an interview process where I'm interviewing a female victim of domestic violence who has allowed the perpetrator to come back in the home, posing a jeopardy to the child. And at one point, handing her the affidavit of what the guy has done in his past, and having to deal with the denial and everything else. If you're not a violent person, or if you're a person that controls your own temper, it can be difficult for you to accept that others don't. So I think a lot of the people that just, and I'm not talking about those that were trying to get, or who got angry trying to stop the exploration of Don's past. I mean, people who generally think, you know, no way the Ramseys harmed their child. No way the McCanns did anything. They're victims. No way these people did anything. They're usually people of empathy and who are projecting the things that they wouldn't do. It's very difficult to accept. Like someone would ask, why would anyone want to access child pornography? That's not, there's nothing arousing about that. That's prepubescent. It's a different world. It's a different world. And so I think I give those people the benefit of the doubt with that.
Tiff.
Thanks, Bella. Thanks, Georgina, for the super chat. What do you think, Peter, of the deflection of questioning about Allie's daughter, Star? I'm not even sure. When was that?
I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, I'm not familiar either. Georgina, was that during Chris's interview? Huh. Okay.
I'm not sure about it.
Says, yeah, I don't remember them asking. Who were they even asking about Star Alley, you mean? Okay, let's see.
Kibby had a great question. And when she says someone, Kibby means Summer right there.
Okay. When Dan says that Summer was the best thing that ever happened to him and that he knew she was gone, do you think that negativity is due in part to his completely negative childhood? Oh, this was be Don, sorry.
Yeah. And I do. I think that's an influence. And that's a good question. That is what the behavioral panel was looking at. Those are one of the factors they put into their analysis.
Yeah, and they did a great, that's why it's so important not to just cookie cutter things across the board and to take factors like culture into account in someone's background. Great question, KB. Georgina, did we ever find out what it was about? Because I think we just missed that
interview. I don't see it yet. Yes, she said yes, but I'm not sure.
Yes to your question.
Okay, but he's not familiar with it, so I guess we can't really answer it anyway because he's not familiar. But thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Georgina.
Georgina, thank you for the super chat. Yeah, I don't know. Is there any more questions?
Well, I know that I like answering questions, but they've gotten a lot of I don't knows from me.
No, I think actually, Peter, I think you've answered so many amazing things. I mean, can't even get better than this.
The guesswork, and it is guesswork, A lot of it's based on human nature and the progression of the lives that we know about them. And of course, the information from the interview room.
So that was, in your opinion, Chris McDonough's interview. And if anyone came in late, the interviews that he did were pivotal, and he was very close to getting some kind of confession or some answers from the Wells.
Yeah, he went on instinct. That was not a legally sound interview, which allows defense attorneys to jump at certain things. You feed someone a response. That's called a therapeutic interview, where he built a bond with her. And that's why I think, not knowing him, that's why I think he probably has a history of gaining confessions. And I think he was close with her to something. But she doesn't want to go to jail. And even if the jail is just for drugs, here's another possibility. And, I can close with this, is that prosecutors get enough information, or convene a grand jury and get enough information, they can always offer her immunity from substance abuse, for example. Now, if there was any involvement with or suspicion of child pornography, or even prostituting her out, it's not likely that they're would offer immunity with that. But they can offer immunity on a lot of peripherals that may be inspiring her to withhold information. Every person you bought drugs from, for example, needs to be checked, needs to be looked at, needs to be interviewed to find out what went wrong there. She didn't just disappear.
Do you think law enforcement have talked to all of those people?
I don't know about all, because it's very transitory. I'm way up here in the Northeast in Maine, and drugs flow from San Pedro or other places, or through the Phoenix area, and they make their way up here, and then they're gone. The dealers are gone. The damage is left behind, but the dealers are gone. The dealers are gone, and that's the nature, even in rural areas I'm talking about here, similar to what may have been down there. From there to Florida to New Mexico, Arizona to Mexico, from China with fentanyl.
And Dawn in the beginning had said she's already in Mexico. Because in the beginning, he was leaning really heavily on, after the gone thing, and people called him out on, how could you say gone? Like, she's gone. Like, you accepted that way too early. And he goes, well, what I meant by that was that she has been trafficked and already across the border.
His mind went there. And I think that's an understanding of drugs, where they come from. Today we don't have borders down there, and we have dead kids in every state of the union, overdosing on fentanyl produced in China, coming through Mexico. And it's been that way for a while now, and I think that Don connected it. For me, looking at his statement today, he connected some dots.
Oh, he did, that statement. I love how you saw in that drugs, and I mean, things that after you say it just seem so obvious, right? But it's like, it's second nature to you, but it takes somebody like you to shine a light on that and just illuminate it for us. I love it. I love learning with you. It's amazing having you here.
It just takes practice listening. And I love to interview. I love interviewing people. Sometimes it's surprising how boring it may appear to others. If I do a joint interview, I like to be the listener, to think about that. But I am basically a one-trick pony. I'm not a crack investigator. I don't have a forensic mind. I don't do any of the work on the ground. It's simply me with words. And so I think that we're going to eventually have this case solved. And I think all the work in the background will applaud those that brought justice, from the actual investigators to the DA.
You're very modest in the work that you do. I find it very valuable, a very valuable tool. There are lots of tools that, you know, people don't think about using just off, you know, off the cuff. And I feel that statement analysis is such a valuable tool, and what you bring and what you have taught is incredible. I just in my day-to-day life, I think that it's so useful. It really is.
Well, thank you.
And you're so humble about it. Yes, the law enforcement officers and boots on the ground should get a lot of credit, but you should as well, because sometimes you're telling them or suggesting to them what questions to lead with and ask, and that's very important.
You know, I think it's a good help, and I've had good success over the years. It's just that there are certain things, and this is why working with other analysts is so important. There are certain things that I don't see because of my background that someone with a different background does. I have some men and women that have forensic minds. And so they'll say, no, wait a minute, think of it from this angle. And it's nice to see that and to be able to grow from that. It's very exciting.
Yes, and that's the best thing about Peter, you guys, is he loves to grow, loves questions being thrown at him. Yeah, and we did kind of, where was that one question up here? Lana Del Toro. Peter kind of did get into that, I would say, like maybe like 30 minutes ago. The question of,
yeah, if you guys asked a question and we didn't put up, it's probably because he had already answered it in some form. And
yes.
So,
yes.
I don't know. What do you think? I mean, on the questions or what?
Well,
I feel like we've kept him long enough. It's already over 2 hours. So
2.5 hours.
And you answered so many questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
Please go subscribe to Peter if you haven't already, you guys. He does lives now. Very good lives. He needs mods. But
yeah, his link is pinned, and it's also in the description of this video. So go check his channel out for sure.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
All righty. Good job, guys. The questions. Great questions.
Great questions.
This was probably the best live for questions, because usually I don't, there's like a lack of questions, and you guys, yeah, you did a good job with writing out questions. So thank you. Like I said, sorry if we didn't get to all of them, but most of the ones I would hope all the ones we didn't put up is because he did answer in some way. And I didn't want to have him keep repeating the same stuff, you know?
Yeah, 2.5 hours, and he's a very busy guy, and we're honored that he could come. And if you guys missed his other interview with us, we talked to him about Darlie Routier's statement. So it'll be like under Zav's playlist for Darlie, I think, right?
Yeah. Or wait, no, yeah, it should be. I hope I have it in there. If not, I'm gonna go check. I'm pretty sure I would have put it in there. Yeah. Yeah. Go check it out. The 911 call, right?
Yes. More insight. Great to have all these tools. If you guys are into true crime, there's so many tools we can utilize, and this is just one of them. And it's amazing to have an arsenal of things you can pick from, and kind of, it allows you, for lack of a better way of putting it, to have like a big palette of colors and be able to draw from it whichever ones you want to use to paint something. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
Jeez, very early.
And no, don't worry, Amanda, because this one you almost had to mention channels because you're talking about specific things. So you don't need to apologize. Normally we don't like mentioning of it, but if you had to explain where you saw it so we could understand what you were talking about. So it's totally fine. I have to go back and watch it because I was so busy in chat. I didn't even really absorb that much. I was trying, but I was trying to get questions, and sometimes I have trouble like paying attention, especially stuff like that deep and that like, And then just trying to get questions. So I feel like I didn't get to really hear a lot. So I am going to go back. And that's probably why I didn't have any questions myself, because I wasn't even, I don't know. I'm sorry. But that's why it's good with both. Like you were in the moment there, and then I could pay attention to chat. So thank you.
Tiff doing, and anyone who tells you guys, anytime you guys are watching a live and someone says, I can see everything going on in chat, it's because their content is the chat. What happens when you have an interview and you're talking about content that's on like this screen versus this screen is it's so hard to multitask that. And if anybody can, I mean, you're a rock star.
Well, then you're not really absorbing one or the other. Like if you're actually really reading the chat, how can you be, you know what I'm saying? You could kind of go back and forth, but you're going to miss something here and there, or you're not even paying attention. You know what I'm saying?
Teamwork.
What's that?
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yes, I wouldn't have been able to do it without you, Bella. So thank you.
And I wouldn't be able to do it without you.
Oh, thanks. That was great, guys. That was good. Aww.
Are you gonna
yeah. Oh, yeah. Positive energy.
But you guys, seriously, Peter's an amazing person, and we love when he comes, and just show him a lot of love. And we'll try to have other interviews like that for you guys, and see how early this was.
Yeah, it was so early for her because she's a trooper. 3 hours early over her time, so it was like 7 in the morning it started for her. So thank you.
That's why it looked like
you look great. I feel like
I rolled out of bed and was
I look like I rolled out of bed. You don't actually. Thanks, Georgina. It was on Unmasked. Okay, thank you. So yeah, thanks, guys. I don't want to keep this too long because I want it just to be with the Peter. But thank you, and we'll be seeing you soon. You guys were awesome today.
Great.
Thanks for all the new subs and all the new members and the super chats. You guys are wonderful. And yes, bye, guys. Chat with you very soon.